I built everything from nothing. In the spring of 1987, I was 34 years old, standing in a gravel parking lot in Mississauga with $2,000 in my pocket and a handshake agreement on a small heating and cooling unit that nobody else wanted. My wife, Margaret, had packed me a sandwich that morning and told me, "Arthur, just don't come home empty-handed." I didn't. That unit turned into a contract. That contract turned into a company, and that company, 37 years later, had grown into one of the most trusted HVAC service providers in the Greater Toronto Area, with 41 employees, a fleet of 12 service vans, and contracts with 3 of the largest property management firms in Ontario. I tell you this not to boast. I tell you this so you understand what was at stake the night I stood outside the door at my own study and heard my nephew say something that changed everything. It was a Thursday evening in late October. The maple in the front yard had gone full red, the way it does every year right around Thanksgiving, and I remember thinking the house smelled like the beef stew Margaret used to make before she passed. My nephew, Daniel, had been living with me for almost 2 years by then, after his mother, my younger sister Carol, died of cancer in the spring of 2022. Daniel had nowhere solid to go. He was 31, between jobs, freshly out of a relationship that had drained him financially and emotionally. I took him in without a second thought. Carol had been my closest family. Taking care of her son felt like the least I could do. Within 6 months, I had brought Daniel into the business. Not in a small way either. I gave him the title of operations manager. I introduced him to our biggest clients personally. I sat with him every Friday morning for 2 hours, going over financials, logistics, supplier relationships, everything I had spent decades learning. My lawyer, Gerald, told me I was moving too fast. My accountant said the same. I told them both that family was family. I should have listened. That October evening, I had come downstairs to get a glass of water. My study is at the end of the main hallway, just past the staircase. The door was slightly open, and as I approached, I heard Daniel's voice. He was on the phone. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was simply walking down my own hallway, but I stopped when I heard my name. "Arthur has no idea," he said. "The old man thinks I actually care about the company. I've been playing the grateful nephew for 2 years, Marcus. 2 years. The moment he signs that transfer agreement, I'm liquidating everything I can and splitting it between us. The employees, the contracts. Not my problem. He built it. Good for him. I just want the payout." I stood there in the dark hallway holding my glass of water. "He keeps talking about legacy," Daniel continued, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. "His legacy. Like I'm supposed to spend the rest of my life fixing other people's furnaces because Uncle Arthur had a dream in 1987. He's 68 years old and still comes into the office 3 days a week like it's his whole identity. It's actually kind of sad." A pause. "No, he won't suspect anything. He's too sentimental. That's always been his weakness. I've got him right where I need him." I walked back to the kitchen. I set down the glass very carefully on the counter so it wouldn't make a sound. I stood there in the dark for a long time. I did not sleep that night, but I also did not cry. I want to be clear about that. What I felt was not grief exactly. It was something colder and more clarifying, like the moment in winter when you step outside and the air hits you and suddenly everything is very sharp and very still. I had been deceived. The question now was what I was going to do about it. By 4 in the morning, I knew. I called Gerald the next morning before Daniel was awake. I told him to pause every document he had been preparing for the business transfer, all of it. The share transfer, the succession planning documents, the updated will codicil that named Daniel as primary beneficiary of the company. Gerald asked no questions. He had been my lawyer for 22 years. He simply said, "Done. Call me when you're ready to talk." Then I called my accountant, Raymond, and told him the same thing. Then I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and waited for Daniel to come downstairs. He appeared at 8:20 in a good mood, wearing the new Arcantarix jacket I had bought him for his birthday in September. He poured himself a coffee and asked if I wanted eggs. I said no thank you. He sat down across from me and started talking about a service contract we were negotiating with a condo developer in Vaughan. A good contract. One that would mean steady work for years. He was enthusiastic. He was charming. He was everything he had always been with me. and I sat there watching him thinking, how long have you been this person? I let him talk. I nodded. I asked a few questions about the Vaughn contract. And then, when he had finished his coffee and was about to get up, I said, Daniel, I want to talk to you about the transfer timeline. He settled back into his chair immediately. I saw something flash in his eyes. Anticipation, maybe. Of course, he said. I've actually been wanting to bring that up. Do you think Gerald can have the documents ready by end of November? I've put the documents on hold, I said. A brief silence. Oh? His voice was careful now. How come? Because I'm not ready, I said. I've been thinking about this, and I realize I've been moving too quickly. 37 years of building something doesn't transfer in an afternoon. Before I hand anything over, I need to know that the person receiving it is truly ready, not just technically, but in terms of values, in terms of how they see the responsibility. Daniel looked at me for a moment. Then he smiled. That makes sense, he said easily. I completely understand. Take all the time you need. He was good. I'll give him that. He was very good. I'll give him that. He was very good. I've drawn up a different kind of agreement, I said. Not a transfer. A trial. 1 year. During that year, you will run the company independently. All operational decisions go through you. But the financials stay locked. No asset sales, no restructuring, no changes to employee contracts without my written approval. At the end of the 12 months, Raymond and I will review everything together. If the company is healthy, if the team is intact, if our client relationships are strong, then we talk about the transfer. He was quiet for a moment. A whole year? A whole year. And if I don't agree, I looked at him steadily. Then I restructure the succession plan entirely. The company goes into a management trust. I've already spoken to Gerald about the mechanism. It's not complicated. Something moved across Daniel's face then, something quick and unpleasant that he covered almost immediately with a reasonable expression. I mean, it seems like a long time, he said. I've already been doing this for almost 2 years. You've been learning for 2 years, I said. That's different from being accountable. He pushed back from the table slightly. I just wonder if this is really about readiness, or if someone has been filling your head with doubt. Gerald, maybe? He's never really warmed up to me. This is my decision, I said, made on my own. He studied me for a long moment. I held his gaze and did not look away. Finally he said, Fine. 1 year. Good, I said. The agreement is on the kitchen counter. Gerald prepared it yesterday. He glanced at the folded papers near the fruit bowl I had placed in there before he woke up, and I watched something register in his expression, the realization that this had not been a spontaneous conversation, that I had prepared. He picked up the papers without another word. What followed over the next several months was one of the most instructive experiences of my life. In the beginning, Daniel performed. That is the only word for it. He came into the office early. He was attentive with staff. He handled a difficult situation with one of our longest-standing clients, a property management firm called Westbrook, with more patience than I expected. I watched all of it from a careful distance, and I will be honest, there were moments when I wondered if I had misunderstood what I heard, when I wondered if the man I was watching was closer to real than the one I had heard on the phone. But then, in February, things began to shift. It started small. He renegotiated a supplier contract without telling me, claiming it was within his operational authority. When I reviewed the new terms, I found that he had taken on a secondary supplier run by someone named Marcus, the same name I had heard on the phone in October. The pricing was not competitive. When I asked Daniel about it, he had an explanation ready. He always had an explanation ready. He always had an explanation ready. Then in March, he let go of a woman named Bonnie, who had been our dispatch coordinator for 11 years. He called it a restructuring decision. Bonnie called me at home crying, and I felt something harden in my chest. I called Daniel immediately. He said Bonnie had been resistant to new systems. Our other longtime employees told me a different story. I called Gerald and Raymond that same week. I've seen enough, I told them. What came next took about 3 weeks to arrange properly. Gerald is methodical, and Raymond does not make mistakes. I reviewed every document twice. I also, during this period, had a quiet conversation with our HR consultant about appropriate severance and about the legal parameters around what Daniel had and had not been authorized to do. I called Daniel into the office on a Tuesday morning in early April. Gerald was present. Raymond was present by video. I had asked our senior technician, Frank, to be there as well. Frank had been with me for 19 years and would be taking on an expanded role going forward. I told Daniel that the trial period was ending early. "You haven't completed the year," he said immediately. "The agreement included a clause," I said, "allowing early termination if there was a pattern of decisions made outside the authorized scope, or decisions that demonstrably harmed employee welfare or client relationships." Gerald placed a document on the table. He walked Daniel through 3 specific instances: the supplier contract, the Bonnie termination, and a third matter involving a client in Brampton where Daniel had made commitments on pricing that exposed us to a significant loss. Daniel's jaw tightened. "This is not fair." "Bonnie worked here for 11 years, I said quietly. "She came to this country from the Philippines in 2003. She learned this industry from the ground up. She never missed a day of work in 11 years. You let her go in February to make room in the budget for a supplier contract that benefits your friend Marcus. That is what is not fair." He was silent. "You have a severance package here," Gerald said, sliding a second document across the table. "It is generous, more generous than is required." "And the transfer?" Daniel asked. His voice had gone flat. "The company will go into a management trust," I said. "Frank will serve as interim general manager. I will remain as a non-operating partner. Over time, I intend to offer equity stakes to several long-term employees, including Bonnie, who I have asked to come back." "You can't do this," Daniel said. "Daniel," I said, and I felt very tired saying it. "I built this company before you were born. I can do whatever I need to do to protect it and the people who depend on it." He stood up. He looked at me the way people look at you when they are deciding whether to say the thing they are actually thinking. And then he said, "You are always going to do this. You never actually intended to give it to me." "I intended to give it to you, more than you will ever know," I said. "I wanted nothing more than to have you carry this forward. You were Carol's son. I loved your mother, but I will not hand 40 employees and their families over to someone who sees them as a line item." He left without signing the severance paperwork. Gerald said he would likely come back to it within a week. He was right. Daniel signed 9 days later. I sat in my office for a long time after that Tuesday meeting. The building was quiet. I could hear the dispatch radio from the front desk. Bonnie had agreed to come back the week before, and the sound of her voice handling calls was, I'll tell you honestly, one of the most relieving sounds I had heard in months. Frank knocked on my door around 4 o'clock. He stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee from the Tim Hortons on the corner, the same order we had shared on hundreds of Tuesday afternoons over 19 years. "You all right, Arthur?" he asked. "I'm getting there," I said. He set the coffee on my desk and sat down. "For what it's worth," he said, "we all knew something was off. We just didn't want to say anything because we knew how much he meant to you." That, more than anything, was the thing that stayed with me, not the betrayal itself. I had made my peace with that somewhere between 4 in the morning and sunrise on that October night. What stayed with me was the loyalty. 41 people who showed up every morning, did their work with integrity, never asked me for anything beyond what was fair, and who had quietly watched and waited and trusted that I would figure it out. I did not deserve to feel proud of myself in that moment, but I did feel grateful, deeply, completely grateful. There is something I want to say to anyone who might be in a position similar to mine, who has given trust to someone and found that trust was being used against them. The instinct, when you discover the betrayal, is to act immediately, to make noise, to let the other person know exactly what you know and exactly how much it has hurt you. I understand that instinct. I felt it standing in that dark hallway. But I am glad I waited. I am glad I thought carefully and prepared fully before I said a single word, because the preparation was not just about protecting the company. It was about being sure. It was about making decisions I could stand behind completely, not decisions made out of anger or hurt, but decisions made out of clarity and responsibility to the people who depended on me. Daniel and I have not spoken since he left the office that April morning. I do not know if we ever will. I am not angry at him, not anymore. I am sad in the way that you are sad when you understand that someone you hoped for became someone different, whether that happened gradually or whether it was always there and I simply chose not to see it. I am no longer sure. Perhaps both things are true. What I know is this: the company is intact. Bonnie is back. Frank is taken to his new role with the kind of seriousness that makes you realize you should have expanded his responsibilities years earlier. We picked up 2 new commercial contracts in the spring. Raymond told me last month that our margins are the healthiest they have been in 6 years, and on Thursday mornings, I still come into the office. I sit at the desk by the window that looks out onto the parking lot, the fleet of 12 vans lined up and clean, the logo I designed in 1991 still on every door, and I drink my coffee and I look at what I built, and I feel the particular quiet satisfaction of knowing that it is still standing and still good. Margaret would have handled all of it better than I did, probably. She was always sharper about people than I was. But I hope, she would have understood the choices I made. She used to say that the hardest thing in business is not competition or cash flow or difficult clients. The hardest thing is staying human when everything is pushing you toward being something harder. I tried to stay human. I think I mostly managed it. That, in the end, is the only thing I am proud of. If this story has stayed with you, if you have ever trusted someone completely and found yourself wondering whether that trust was earned, I would ask you to leave a comment below. Tell me what you would have done differently. Tell me what you think I should have done. These conversations matter to me. Every single one. And if you are new here, welcome to the channel. My name is Arthur. I built a heating and cooling company in Mississauga for 37 years. And apparently, at 68, I am still learning things. Subscribe if you want to hear more. I have a few more stories left in me,